right. Welcome to Study Group. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome, everyone at home. Today, we're going to be talking about the 7 Adjutant mind spirits. This is kind of an addition to our last podcast where we were talking about the gift of mind coming from the Holy Mother Spirit. And so we're just going to keep opening gifts here, and we're going to have 7 gifts in which we're really going to open. And that's just this idea of how we're encircuited in mind. Since it's not coming from us, we have a connectivity point. And so these are these kind of encircuit points that allow us to engage in the circuitry of mind and the ministry of mind in the Mother Spirit. So Chuck's maybe going to get us started here with this first slide.
Sure. So as Derek said, we're going to be talking about the 7 adjutant mind spirits. And this little quote there at the bottom is actually a repeat from the last show where they point out, and I think this is really the crucial understanding that runs through all of this, which is that our brain and our associated nervous system possess innate capacity for response to mind ministry. So the image here with the 2 human forms showing all the nervous system running throughout the body. I mean, you think about it, you need your mind to move your hand, you need your mind to move your toes. All parts of our body are connected to mind. So this involves not just our brain, I think, but also our nervous system.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of the distribution center, the
right.
channels of
and
distribution.
We feel things in different parts of our body too that aren't just physical always. So we'll be looking at that a little bit more too as we go along. But if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
Here we have a couple of important definitions. I mean, as anyone knows who's studied the Urantia Book, it was written in the early 20th century, published in 1955, but most of the text was finalized in the 1930s. So it's always helpful to have a 1930s dictionary to check the definitions for words that are used in the book, because some definitions change over time. But 2 of the important terms that are come up here, one of which is adjutant. We're referring to these as the adjutant mind circuits. So an adjutant is someone who helps or supports something, a person, a process. So in terms of mind, there's the universal mind, but as human beings, we're endowed with what you might call a evolutionary mind. So it assists us in our growth and development. Our mind capacities are what enable us to grow and live and make our decisions. So they can be looked at as kind of like helping us. And that's, I think, part of the reason they use that term. This next one, though, I think is the most important. The Urantia Book talks about circuits a lot. Hundreds of times this term comes up in the book. And in the 1930s dictionary, one of the important definitions, which is, I think, the one they're referring to, is a system for 2-way communication between 2 places. So when you think of mind this way, like the mind that our mind endowment comes from the center of the universe, but it comes to us all the way out where we are on this planet, on the edge of reality. And it establishes a 2-way communication, and not just with the source of our mind, but with deity as well, and even with each other. So this capacity that we have to communicate is a circuit phenomenon, you could say, in the sense of this definition. So we'll see more about how that plays out as we go along, but that's really crucial. So on the right-hand side here, I put these 3 pictures. So the first one is a typical complex antenna. So you can see it has a lot of receiving apparatus there, just like our brain does as well. And in the bottom is a smartphone, and that little piece to the right is the antenna that's built into a smartphone. It's pulled out, but that's what it looks like. So smartphones have antennas, all kinds of communication have antennas, and even we could even think of ourselves as having an antenna structure. We think of our brain and nervous system that way. So just to complete that thought, here's some just quick stats. Our nervous system connects to every part of our body, and they say nearly 45 miles of nerves running through our body. So that's a lot of connectivity potential. That's a lot of exposed surface, for example, for reception. And then within our brain, it's crazy. They say there's 100,000 miles of myelin-covered nerve fibers just in the brain of an average 20-year-old. So again, we have this apparatus that functions internally to our body, but it also provides exposure to reception coming in from.
Well, that was a lot of information right there. As far as maybe we could put this in context for people to understand maybe why we chose those examples of things. So it's as far as the antenna, we talked about our brain receiving a lot of this mind ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the connectivity in the circuitry is what we're talking about, how we're connecting to the adjutant mind spirits, which allow us this circuit one-to-one and from 2-point connectivity to paradise with the universal mother spirit. So we do have a connectivity with deity in that sense. And then the fact that we are this remote kind of wireless connectivity point where we can connect to the cloud wherever as we ascend our adjutant mind spirit functionality. And I know it sounds a little confusing, but we're going to start to break it down a little bit here. Maybe, Chuck, if you want to break us down, maybe the 7 adjutant mind spirits that we do work with.
Mm-hmm. So here's the list of these 7 adjutant mind spirits we're going to be talking about today. And these are really endowments of human consciousness. These are gifts of capacity that we've been given. And they're listed in the evolutionary order of their appearance in the evolving animals of this planet. So we've got a little example here of our kitty, and he has 5 of these, and we have 7. But the very first one is the spirit of intuition. Following that is the spirit of understanding, and then the spirit of courage. After that is, we can put together our understanding. If we combine understanding with courage, then maybe we can have knowledge. So the spirit of knowledge sponsors our capacity to grow in our knowledge of reality. And based on all that, then we can begin to discover. The spirit of counsel is where the desire to communicate finds expression. So that's the mind gift that gives us the urge to communicate. And then beyond that is the spirit of worship, which includes the urge to communicate with God. So you can see how these kind of grow and from one to the next, lead from one to the next. And then finally, we have the spirit of wisdom, which is kind of the view of the whole, where we make the decisions that really guide our progressive development. So I invite everyone to go to 36.5 if you want to look at the full definitions of these, or pause the screen and you can see these abbreviated definitions.
At any time with these slides, if we go too fast, just pause it.
Just pause. And you
screen capture or something
right.
like that.
But anyway, the point here is there's a progression here. And when we reach the full complement of all 7 of these adjutants, we become fully a human being. That's sort of part of the definition of being a human organism. And then this provides the basis for then the growth into spiritual development on top of that.
Right.
So we'll see how that works as we go forward. You want to go to the first slide here?
Yeah, I'm going to start reading some slides. So we'll start to see this stuff kind of in action. I know it's kind of abstract right now as we just talk about it, but hopefully this will help out a little bit. So from paper 117, they say, in the mortal experience, the human intellect resides in the rhythmic pulsations of the adjutant mind spirits and affects its decisions within the arena produced by encircuitment within this ministry. So just kind of responding to the liveness, the pulsations of the rhythm of life that our mind responds to, that all life, kind of our heartbeat responds to, all of these rhythms that life entails of, is coming from paradise. And through the ministry of our encircuitment with these mind spirits, with mind, we get the opportunity to partake and vibe with, match, align frequencies with that pulsation. And that's part of life and how it's expressed. Mm-hmm. And so the 7 adjutant mind spirits should not be regarded as entities. They are more like circuits. They are, in fact, a level of consciousness of the divine minister. So essentially, we're using the mind of the Holy Mother Spirit and then the divine minister of whatnot. And so in that ministry, it's kind of this series of step downs of mind. And in the adjutant mind spirit is where we're connected with her and everything else in deity that's connected to this mind. Essentially
gives us our consciousness and our mind potential. One thing I might point out is that there are several terms that are used for our local universe mother spirit being one, but the divine minister is another. And we may see some other ones come up as we go along. But the idea here in this second paragraph is that when they say that these mind spirits are not entities, they're more like circuits, what they're saying is that this is what connects us to the source of our mind, which is the divine minister. And not only that, but they are in fact a level of her consciousness. So that means that she's conscious of what we're conscious of. She actually, in a sense, sort of inhabits or lives within our consciousness, even though we may not know she's there. But she's there with us all the time. And she's a ministering. Her role is to minister to us through mind. So knowing she's there is actually very comforting. And so we can keep that in mind as we go along. And I like, Derek, what you said about the rhythmic pulsations. Anything that's alive has got a kind of you think about a heartbeat, or even the weather, or not that the weather is alive in quite the same sense, but that there's this pulsation that goes on.
With ebb and flow.
Ebb and flows, the things that go on with things that are alive. So this is true with us as well. And this arena that they're talking about is our experience of consciousness. So this arena has these 7 aspects to it, these 7 qualities of perception, motivation, understanding, that we've just listed are all part of the qualities of this arena of consciousness.
Yeah, and I like how it allows for this opportunity to really accept the idea that you aren't really apart or separated from God, but yet you can start to see the nuances of how that is. Mm-hmm. So at first, maybe you could take by faith and belief that, you're not as separate from God, but then you start to understand what being sonship or child of God is. And then you start to understand how you're encircuited with deity, part of this threefold Godhead. One part of it almost is deity that you're sharing mind with. Mm-hmm. So if you're sharing mind, you're not very separate at all. You're thinking together. So that's where it's this thought, word, deed, something in accordance with the Holy Spirit or with God. It really is that opportunity to do that.
And these endowments of qualities too, of character, like Jesus would say, one of his watchwords was courage. Mm-hmm. Well, one of these mind spirits from the mother spirit is the spirit of courage. Mm-hmm. So the gift of courage comes from this urge, this sense that we have that courage is important, let's say. And we try to grow in our courageous, engagement with life. That's consistent with what Jesus was talking about.
Well, we won't go too far off topic here, but it is from the Holy Spirit that we get the conviction and the vision of life after death. Of surviving this life.
And that too, yeah.
And I think that kind of can be part of courage as well.
Yeah, right. But all those, in addition, all those 7 qualities that we read, those are all, we recognize them within ourselves and just think they're natural. But we should understand that those are actually designed and given to us purposefully so that we can grow and evolve in our life experiences. Without knowledge, without wisdom, without spirit insight, we'd be lost. So that's why those are so important.
It seems like a lot of this
as
stuff
gifts.
It's kind of like involuntary action, some of this stuff. But as you evolve or progress, your choices and your decisions really make the most difference in a lot of this progression.
Right. And all 7 of those come into a more full expression as we grow and develop and, in self-mastery.
Yeah. Okay. So let me read these next quotes. From paper 36, they say, "These mind spirits send forth their influence into all the inhabited worlds, each seeking receptivity capacity for manifestation." So we have receptivity capacity, us as humans.
And this is a universal provision. This is broadcast into all the inhabited worlds.
Right. And if you have capacity, you get some of this.
Yes.
The second quote is, "The function of the first 5, so 5 of the 7, the function of the first 5 in the animal orders is essential to the function of all 7 as human intellect. This animal relationship makes the adjutants more practically effective as human mind. Hence, animals are indispensable to man's intellectual as well as to his physical evolution." So we see how the evolution of animals and large mammals or whatever, how we've evolved into having this human brain function and mind receptivity, that we share this same mind with the animals. So we're coming along in the same arena with animals, but it just so happens that when there's an evolutionary climax or a peak into these intelligent beings that are capable of worship and wisdom, then this is where the human mind starts to make their decisions along this process of becoming a spirit-led being. And as we talked about in the last podcast, there are big gulfs in between those developments.
Right. So there's essentially two tracks of evolutionary development going on. There's the physical evolution, which we can see in the fossil record. We can see it in the animals. We see it in ourselves, how, we're, evolved from the higher mammals. We can see that on a physical level. But at the same time, there's also a mind evolution going on. And the evolution of mind is in the reception capacity. So the human brain is more complex than a higher mammal brain. And that something about that complexity creates the reception capacity for these two higher levels of mind, which are the capacity for worship and wisdom, which animals don't have. So it's the connectivity of those two mind spirits is dependent on the physical evolution of our brain, and that they work together. So that's kind of part of what they're saying here. But even the first 5 adjutants in us are much like they are in the animals. So we look at our kitty here, he's got the spirit of counsel, going full bore. He wants to hang out with us. You can see him.
He's here right here.
He's here right now. That's the spirit of counsel
computer
functioning in our little kitty. Yeah. And we definitely enjoy having him with us as well. So that's that highest level of mammal mind. That then on top of that, we have these two higher endowments.
It also allows for this kinship. People love animals so much and wonder what is it? Is it just because
we're really related,
and cute?
Yeah,
but we're actually in the same family.
Sure enough, we actually
share a lot of instincts and a lot of just emotions or feelings from the mind.
And we share those same levels of mind.
Yeah,
literally.
All right. Well, you want to read some of these quotes?
Sure. Okay, so now we talked a little bit about how we connect to mind. Now we're going to focus on these last couple slides on how we move from connecting to mind to connecting to spirit, which is yet a higher level of reality for mind. So they say that the intellectual, social, moral, and spiritual evolution are dependent on the mind ministry of the 7 adjutant spirits and their superphysical associates. Now, they don't name the superphysical associates, but this is where we're starting to get into the spirit ministry, like the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of Truth, the Spirit of God that lives within us, I think is what they're hinting at there.
Seraphic support.
Right, and the seraphim, all those are able to assist us once we have these 7 adjutant levels of mind fully functioning. Then they say that all of man's truly religious reactions, meaning like spiritual reactions, desire for God, for example, not institutional religion necessarily. All of man's truly religious reactions are sponsored by the early ministry of the adjutants of worship and wisdom. So those last 2 that the animals don't have, that we do have, are what open us up and give us the capacity for thinking about spiritual things. Man's first supermind endowment, now this is on top of the adjutant spirits, is that of personality encircuitment in the Holy Spirit of the universe creative spirit. And this again is another name for our mother spirit. This influence functions to enlarge man's viewpoints of ethics, religion, and spirituality. So here we have, as I was saying, this evolutionary development where once we're fully endowed with mind through these 7 adjutants, then superimposed on that, we receive a spirit endowment. And the first of these spirit endowments is the Holy Spirit of our mother spirit. And then that influence continues to enlarge our understanding of these higher dimensions of reality, like ethics, religion, and spirituality.
Yeah, you start to see how important the Holy Spirit really is. I know maybe some Christians get a little confused between the ministries of the Holy Spirit
why don't you explain
and the
that?
Spirit of Truth.
Right, they're not the same.
They're not the same. As the Urantia Book points out, Jesus is the Spirit of Truth, essentially, in spirit. And as he said, he's going to his Father, and he's going to come back as the Spirit of truth and show us that which is to come and not speak of his own name, like in the book of John. But then we have the Holy Spirit, and this Holy Spirit has been ministering to us since the beginning of time. And you essentially see that that's how people found their soul, found God, found a way off this planet into eternal destiny by evolving in their mind into worship and wisdom, and to then choose beyond themselves and to choose into a greater good, a greater love, a greater God. And that's really kind of the special sauce, so to speak, of mind evolution from animal into human.
And it's also the birth, like you said before, of the conceptualization of life after death. That we have the potential to survive this life that comes with this first spirit endowment from the Mother Spirit. She gives us that. So maybe we probably mentioned this before, but we have 3 of these spirit endowments. There's the Spirit of the Father living within our minds.
The thought adjuster.
And then there's the Spirit of truth,
Jesus,
which is the presence of Jesus. And then there's the Holy Spirit, which is the Spirit of the Mother Spirit. So they got us coming and going.
Yeah, we got a lot of help.
We got a lot of help.
So quit your crying. No,
right. So having a conceptual handle on these endowments, I find very helpful. And to have that sort of sorted out authoritatively in the Urantia Book is especially helpful. So in that sense, that's one of the reasons why we call it a revelation, because it's revealing realities that we can experience once we know they're there. Right. So once we've been told about them, then we can look for it and experience it, but we might never find it or understand it otherwise.
Yeah, once you've been told about it, then you can start to weigh it with the Spirit of truth in your own mind.
Right.
And the Spirit of truth can show you things.
Exactly.
And the Holy Spirit can keep this conviction in you that can have a testament to know that this is true and all that. So,
and we have the companionship of our Creator living literally within our minds as well. So we're in good shape if we can just...
Yeah, I would say don't get too wrapped up in like, is this Holy Spirit, is this Spirit of Truth talking, is this God within me? Because it's all deity. Just develop the relationship with that presence, however that unfolds.
And they tell us that it's the seraphim who really unify all those influences. So it's our personal relationship with our seraphim, even though we can't see them necessarily. You don't see them. You can talk to them if you want. Yeah. You can believe they're there and have faith and begin to understand, but they're the ones who personalize all of these endowments and make them real. And in the next life, that'll become just a day-to-day experience for us. And
that's why Jesus said, when you're going to pray, go pray alone. So people don't think you're crazy talking to angels.
Yeah, right. No, seriously. It really brings all of this alive to engage in that way.
All right, well, let's talk about the survival.
So then here, they say that our survival, we were talking about that a minute ago, the survival of mortal creatures, such as us, mortal meaning that our body is going to die sooner or later, the survival of mortal creatures is wholly predicated on the evolvement of an immortal soul within the mortal mind. So our material mind, our physical brain is eventually going to wear out and, disintegrate. But while we're alive, within that mind, we can begin to develop something immortal. We can begin to evolve a version of ourselves that's not physical, which is what they're talking about here. And then they go on to say, during life, the mortal will, the personality power of decision choice, is resident in the material mind circuits. As terrestrial mortal growth proceeds, this self, with its priceless powers of choice, becomes increasingly identified with the emerging Urantia soul identity.
Entity.
Right. This emerging Urantia soul entity, which is this version of ourselves that I was talking about. So we have this opportunity to do in other places what they refer to as transferring the seat of our identity. So I'm no longer thinking of myself as a physical body. I'm no longer thinking of myself as a physical body. I'm thinking of myself as an eternal, potentially eternal or immortal Urantia being, meaning a soul being, meaning an entity that's derived from spirit. as opposed to derived from the physical level. So this lifetime gives us a bridge to change, to reach that higher sense of identity during this life.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that we're able to do that, then we create the potential to survive into the next life.
Mm-hmm.
If we're totally identified just with our body or with material things, there's nothing survivable because you can't take material things off the planet.
Right. Yeah. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky as to, your terminology, how you talk about things. Because I was thinking about maybe like Kundalini yoga or something like that, where it's just like a practice that kind of puts people in this state of something more. And a lot of people talk about something more, being in these states. But here we're talking about a practice, but also a consistent relationship development with deity to a point where you're having an ongoing conversation and influence.
Right, a process.
And in that process that grows, just like relationships grow or whatnot, you get this expanded capacity, and more ministry comes, more insight comes as you're offering more capacity and more space and more this reciprocity in the circuitry that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The capacity expands.
Right.
And so I can always think about maybe in ancient history, before maybe there's the spirit of truth or whatnot, people were going through these processes of enlightenment or finding the Godhead or whatever it was, that they ascended this ladder of deity connectivity through the encircuitment, and then were bestowed with the spirit of God within them. And they might call it enlightenment. I mean, it's given a thought adjuster, something like that.
Yeah. So the one way to kind of summarize all of that is our desire for God.
Mm-hmm.
So once we begin to realize that the we are a personal being, and the reality behind all reality is a personal creator being, we begin to want to have a relationship with that being. We want to know that being, and we find that being is actually present within us. So that's what opens the door to this kind of relationship you're talking about. And that the root of that, or fundamentally in a way, is our desire for that relationship, our desire for God.
Yeah, having that intention, and then Jesus kind of backs that up. He says, "Seek and you shall find. Knocking, the door will be open to you."
Right.
Kind of knocking on the ceiling of our capacity and asking for more capacity. Can you shed more light in here, please? Because I want to see what's up there.
And once we get to know Jesus, we fall in love with him. So then we have this love bond, and that's what creates this permanence.
And that's what I would say. That's what makes Jesus so helpful, because he allows for you to. He makes it easier for an individual to bridge the gap between mind identity and the love of spirit.
Right.
And how spirit works in love. And if you learn Jesus and you get to know Jesus, you're going to learn that way.
Yeah, right. You're going to learn to love God through Jesus. So he who has seen me has seen the Father. So all of his beautiful qualities of character and his loving nature, everything about him that we fall in love with, those are all characteristics of God. And that's why we worship God. And that's why we want to be with God as much as possible, and we have the capacity to do that. Our minds have been gifted with that capacity.
And that's why, I discern the value of Jesus. Yeah. Because I want to, everything that he does that's good, I see value in it. I want to be like.
You want to be like that.
So it happens that he's really close to God too. So
like a big brother kind of.
Yeah.
And a father and everything else. But he's that. He blazes the trail. He shows us the way, but he's kind, he's understanding, but he doesn't give the game away. And he has certain expectations too.
Well, he's not going to tease you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe a little.
Well, okay. So we're not going to tease you. And like good big brothers here, we got a little bit of a model here that maybe can give you a little bit of mental framework. This isn't exactly the way it plays out, but we've been doing a lot of reflecting, a lot of testing, and we kind of see that, the similarities of how we're encircuited with the cosmic mind and the adjutant mind spirits within that is a way that is a kind of a diagram that we can start to look at it from. We talk about the chakra system, and it's just kind of another way to kind of look at the system of how it works in our body.
Yeah. Yeah. Many people have noticed that over the history of this planet, there have been empirical discoveries of our human nature that in some ways reflect or are patterned after what we've just been studying about the 7 adjutant mind spirits. Mm-hmm. So one of these is the chakra system, and there's maybe other ways of talking about that. But each one of these chakras, it has a location in the body, and it's also been noticed that those same locations correlate to our endocrine system. So particularly like the pineal and the pituitary, the Urantia Book even talks about how those are essential in our spirit receptivity. So, and then these other endocrine glands in our endocrine system, conceivably function in other ways that are maybe patterned after these adjutants. But a few of them, you can see a pretty clear correlation. Like one of them, for example, is the spirit of courage. The 3rd chakra is in your gut, and people talk about having guts. We feel, that's where we feel courage, is in that part of our body. So that may not be a coincidence. Or obviously this spirit of counsel, which is in the throat. That's where we communicate. Our voice is in our throats. And the spirit of counsel, if it correlates to the 5th chakra, would be kind of focused there or have an energetic center there. I won't go through all of them, but the spirit of worship, that correlates to like the 3rd eye, our spirit sight, our ability to see God or conceptualize God is kind of traditionally, or in many traditions, correlated with that location, which then correlates with those 2 particular glands. And then finally, the spirit of wisdom, you could look at that as kind of the view from above. You could see the whole system. You can look at your whole life. You can see everything about it and how all these other systems are fulfilling or not fulfilling their functions. So that's an interesting mapping, I think, of what has been discovered historically, empirically, evolutionarily in these different traditions, and there are many of them, with what we're learning from the Urantia Book. So it seems reasonable to me that the Urantia Book, as it often does, is kind of straightening us out and helping us to understand things that many times we've already discovered, but kind of in a distorted way.
Absolutely.
Or in an incomplete way.
Yeah, an evolutionary interpretation. And I like this. And we're not claiming that this is the way that it's laid out, but I think that it's a practical way for maybe your mind can start to develop a little system in how it works.
And also just how you feel in your body.
Yeah. You can put your mind in your body and have some mindfulness
and not just be in your head.
We talk about, how the microbiome and in the gut works with the brain. And we almost have a bit of our mind in all of our body. And then that's what we talk about, maybe the body knows, or you have these instincts, or what does your body say? You go in your body and feel. And like I said, this isn't the end all be all, but just a little model to work with. And hopefully it helps you guys out, is how you picture divinity living with us.
Yeah. And I particularly like this diagram of the chakras that show them as almost like I/O ports, input output ports. Because oftentimes chakra diagrams are front view and they just look like these colored dots in the middle of your body. And they don't really convey this idea that there's a dynamic system of communication and energy flow through these locations in our body. So that's one of the reasons I picked that particular diagram, because it suggests those that process of not just connectivity, but also of energy flow through our body that we can pick up on, we can encourage that, we can express it, we can feel like, the love in our heart is based on knowledge. Like they say, you have to know someone to love them, in the Urantia Book. And that's the 4th chakra, which is the heart chakra. So we can, begin to cultivate those feelings in our body that support our mind and spirit development.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the path on where, when we talk about light healing or distant healing, astral projection, things like that, I think in mind is where this stuff is going to happen.
Right.
So if you're equipped with the right tools, the right terminology, the right visions, and the right intention in your heart, hopefully this can help you a little bit more. If you're out there looking to help and to heal.
Right. And even the thing about like non-local phenomena, which comes up a lot in these kind of studies, the mother spirit is simultaneously aware of everything in her local universe. It's actually like part of her body.
So she knows what's what.
She knows what's what.
Who's who, where's what. Everything.
So she can create simultaneity. So people, the big mystery sometimes is like people pray in one place for the well-being of a person who is far away. but simultaneously there'll be a response in this person who's far away.
Totally.
And the only explanation, they have no way to explain that, but the Urantia book gives us a way to understand that through the consciousness of the Mother Spirit, where she's, we just read that these circuits are literally her consciousness. They're levels of her consciousness.
And absolutely. I mean, this happens to me on a daily level where I'll be thinking about someone and then they call me.
Yeah.
Or they text me right then.
Those kinds of things. Yeah. Right. So we have connectivity to each other, to deity, and these mind circuits. This is a realm that can be explored going forward. And I think we're going to begin to make some really interesting discoveries.
Absolutely.
As
cool.
we go forward with this understanding.
All right. Well, thanks, Chuck, for doing some good work on this one.
Sure.
And hopefully you guys have a greater understanding of our mind gifts. We opened up a bunch of gifts and we're blessed to have them. And hopefully there will be a little bit more connectivity between us and you guys. If you guys have any other topics that you might want to dive into, just let us know. Leave a comment.
Sure.
Hopefully we're going to try and get into maybe some Makaventa Melchizedek here soon.
Yeah, you post questions too on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
We're happy to answer them and get into discussions there as well.
Yeah.
So let's make it a real study.
Yeah. And as always, we always appreciate the support and feedback and everything. So God bless everyone. Thanks for joining us. And
indeed.
See you next time.
Next time.